Hello, thanks for joining in. This is part 4 of our like and subscribe project. After this, there will be at least 2 more lessons, I think, at least 2 more to finish this project. So in the last lesson, lesson 3, we finished animating the graphic. So now we're going to start working on this to make it something that is functional in Final Cut Pro. Alright, just before we continue, some of you will have downloaded an earlier version of the project file which needs the position and anchor point updated in the base layer. In the banner group, please check the base layer. If you see that the values are at -500, put them both back to 0. Make sure your overlays and guides and rulers are active. Drag a guide out, we're going to need that soon. Go to the bell and light groups, and if they're open, close them up. Use Shift to group select them. Then use the Shift command G to group them. I'm going to name this group Bell and Light. Set the position back to 0. Oh, no. Undo that. First we need to use this guide to remember the location. Okay, now go back and clear the position values. Go to the X position and use the menu to add a link behavior. What we want to do is make sure that the Bell and Light group can update its location if the base layer changes the length. So add the banner as the link source. Set the link to the right edge. Use the offset to bring it back into position. Now go to the subscribe button group. If it's open, close it up. Move the guide to mark the position at the edge. Go and set the X position to 0 and add another link behavior. Add the base layer as the source and set this one to the left edge. Use the offset to put it back to the right location. Next, select the project. Go to the Objects menu and choose Rig. I'm going to name this Profile. Then let's add a checkbox widget and name that Profile too. Select the base layer and go to Geometry. Just drag the width to the Profile widget. Select the widget and turn it on. Set the width value to 1320. Okay, so what we did here is rig the width of the base layer so that it has 2 size modes. So when the profile is active, this base layer is going to adjust the length to make space for it so that everything fits well in the layout. The edge links that we added just before make sure that the two groups on either side will adjust automatically to the change in the width. I'll just move the guide out of the way and turn it off. Okay, so now we want to add our drop zone and make our profile graphic. Select the bell and light group. Then go to the Objects menu and add a drop zone. Select the project layer and look at the Publish Parameters inspector. You can see that Motion has already published the source zone for us, but there are still some features that we need to add here. Select the drop zone. There's a couple of important parameters that are missing by default. We need to add something to the drop zone to make them appear. Okay, so this is what I do for that. Add another drop zone. Now look in the media panel. For every drop zone that we add, Motion's going to add an asset for that. So now we have one asset to spare. So we can use this for the source for our first drop zone to make the missing parameters come in. Okay, go back to the first drop zone. Now we have that extra asset available in the menu. Select it. Okay, the pan and scale parameters are now available to publish, so do that. Then clear the source, delete the second drop zone, then go back to the media panel and delete that asset. Okay, select our drop zone. You see that the pan and scale parameters are gone, but in the published parameters they are still there for us. Okay, so now we're ready to start building the graphic for the drop zone, and as we do this, we're going to work in a way that makes it practical and functional in Final Cut Pro. Select the drop zone, add a new group with Shift-Command-N, add your drop zone to the group. I'm going to name this DZ Clip. Now we need a mask source to clip this group. Select the Scale In group and add a circle anywhere you like. Reset the shape position. In geometry, set the radius to 900. Now add an image mask to the DZ Clip group. Then add the circle as the source. We could use the Shape Mask tool to do this. I generally prefer to use image masks for drop zones, for many different reasons. Okay, close the group, and just use Shift-Command-N again to add a new group. And drag the circle and the DZ Clip group into the new group. I'm going to name this one DZ Scale Pub. So with this group, we're going to set an independent anchor point so that we can publish a size control for the end user. Go to Properties and link the Y scale to the X scale like we've done before. When we were animating scales, we linked the Y scale to the X scale because it makes it easier to animate in the keyframe editor. But this time, this is not a group that's going to animate. This is all done to make things easier for the end user in Final Cut Pro. If we link the scales, we can publish just one clean parameter. Okay, so to explain what I mean, let's publish the main scale. Okay, so here it is. I'll just give it a different name so that we can tell it apart. So as you see, when you publish the main scale, we get the scale slider, but then the menu can open up, we get the Y and the X and the Z scale parameters all independently. And these are redundant because if the end user was to use these, it's going to make a big mess of the graphic. Okay, so we're going to get rid of that. Go back to the Scale Pub group and just publish the X scale. Let's go back to the publish parameters. Okay, now we have one simple slider for the scale. I'll just rename that for now. As you can see, we already have a functional issue that we need to solve. The way it works right now, increasing the scale will overlap and cover up the subscribe button layers. Okay, go to the mask source. We set a radius of 900. So let's go to the anchor point and set that at -900. Okay, so now this graphic's going to scale out and away from the button graphic. Make sure you have the DZ pub group selected. Add another group with the Shift Command N, and drag the scale pub group to the new group. I'm going to name this group DZ Set. So I'm going to use this group to make the graphics smaller. Drop the scale to 5%. Make sure you have the DZ Set group selected, and add another group. Drag DZ Set into the new group. I'm going to name this group DZ Position Publish, or PosPub for short. Now we could publish the main position for this, giving the user the X and the Y and the Z, or we could publish X and Y independently. I think for this kind of graphic, all we really need is the X position. Okay, so just publish the X position. I'll name it as drop zone position for now, but later on we will be renaming all of these parameters to something better. Alright, so previously, when we were animating the cursor, I recommended that you break up the animation roles into specific groups. So as you've seen, we want to follow the same mindset when we think about building a graphic, the functions that we have to publish, and how they're going to work together. Okay, now select the PosPub group, add a new group, and drag PosPub into the new group. I'm going to name this group DZ Edge. Go to Properties and add a link to the X position. Now go to the button group and open up the pop group. Apply the button layer as the link source and set the link to the left edge. So we just linked the profile graphic to follow the left edge of the button layer, but now we need the profile graphic to ignore the animation of the button. If we look in the keyframe editor, we can see that linking to the button layer has created an animation curve on the X position. So this is coming from the scale animation of the button. As the button pops the scale, the edge is moving, and that causes the profile to bounce on the X-axis. Alright, let's go to the link in the inspector and see what we can do about this. Note the source frame mode. It's set to continuous by default, and so this means the link updates on every frame. By setting the mode to fixed, we can choose a frame to lock in the link relationship. The source frame value is asking us which percentage of frames do we want the link to hold at. It's at 100 by default, which is the last frame of the project. Okay, so we're in a 300 frame project. Now normally I would set this link to be at 50% of the frames, which is halfway of a project, because usually this is going to fall between the build in and the build out markers. Now that's another topic to explain in detail another time, but generally we don't want the link to be influenced by the change in duration of the template in Final Cut Pro, so we want the link to fall somewhere between the markers. In this case, our build animation is very long, and the build-in marker is set after the halfway point. So I'm just going to check the exact frame. At 5.25, it's 175 frames. So a quick bit of math tells me that's 58% of the frames. So I will update my link with that value. Okay, so now the profile doesn't bounce around when the button pops. From here, select the DZ edge group. Go to Properties, drag the opacity parameter to the profile widget. Set the widget to the off state and set the opacity to 0. Cool, so now the profile is only visible in the active state. Leave the widget turned on. And go to the edge link. Use the offset to adjust the position to set it away from the edge. Now when we play the animation, we can see we have another problem to solve. We want the profile to be close to the button by default, but when the button pops, it overlaps the profile, which looks messy and kind of unprofessional as well. So, moving the offset even more is not a great idea. It leaves less room for the text that we need to add. And if you're freelancing, we know it's really important to do our best to achieve the design specifications that we've been set. So we need to find a way to keep our design layout and also stop the button from overlapping. Alright, so to do that, let's rig some keyframes. Go to the pop group, go to the X scale that we animated. Make sure the playhead is at the first frame of the keyframes. Now drag the X scale to the profile widget. Now that we have the keyframes on the widget, from here we must manage them from the widget. If we try to manage them again now from the keyframes editor, we're bound to make a mess. So at this point, before you go any further, I recommend that you save a copy of your project file so that if anything goes wrong, you can go back and start again. Use the widget to click through to the next frame where the scale is at 110%. Now just change this value to 105%. That's all we need to do. Okay, let's check the result. Turn the profile off. The scale is back to 110. Turn the profile on. The scale is now set to 105. Okay, a quick check of the animation. Everything's looking good. Okay, so move the playhead to where the button is at full pop and set the profile into the ideal place. Okay, so that's it for the profile zone. But now that the profile zone is finished, we've revealed the next problem that we have to solve. So because we have added a secondary length mode to the banner, the cursor is now animating to the wrong location. It doesn't quite travel far enough to meet the like and the bell anymore. Okay, and we'll solve that problem in lesson 5. Thank you very much for taking the time to join in. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.